Hello and welcome to Mahika Tutorials. So far we have seen the use of try block and catch block. We have seen that try block encloses the statements that might cause exception to occur in our code, and catch is the handler block, that is, if exception occurs then control goes to the catch block. But if exception does not occur in our code, then catch block will be never executed. Now we are going to see the use of finally block. Finally is again a keyword in Java. Finally block is a block which is always executed whether exception occurs or does not occurs, and whether exception occurs but it is handled or not. In every case finally block is executed. Finally block follows try block or catch block. That is, either we can give try followed by finally, or we can give try and then catch block which is followed by finally block. Finally block is used to put cleanup code such as closing connection or closing file, etc. For each try block, there can be 0 or more catch blocks, but only one finally block. We have seen that we can give multiple catch blocks with the one try block, but there can be only one finally block for every try block. Finally block is not executed if program exits either by calling system.exit or by causing a fatal error that causes the process to abort. Unless and until we explicitly call system.exit or there is some fatal error, this finally block is always executed. We can understand the concept by this diagram. Within our code, whether an exception occurs, that is, exception occurred is either true or false. If it is false, then again finally block is executed. But if it is true, that is, if exception occurs, then whether we are handling it or whether we are not handling, in both the cases finally block will be executed. That is, finally is executed whether exception occurs or does not occurs. And when exception occurs, whether we are handling it, whether we are not handling it, in both the cases finally block will be executed. So we can use finally block to put the code that we want to be executed irrespective of whether exception occurs or does not occurs in our code. We will see an example for finally block now. What we are going to do in this example, we are going to handle input mismatch exception that occurs when we are not entering the kind of value that we are reading. Let's suppose if I am giving sc.nextInt, that is, I am trying to read an integer value but the user enters some string value, then it will cause input mismatch exception to occur. So we will handle that exception and we will use finally block in this example. So we will first create our new file and then we will make use of finally block over there. Now here we will write a method. Let's say check. Now here we will have two data members. Let's say one for age and second for name. We will read the values from the user for name and age. So we will declare an instance of scanner class. Now we need to import this. We will ask the user to enter these two values, enter age and name. And then we know that the reading of these values might cause input mismatch exception. Suppose if user enters name first and then age, so name cannot be stored in integer variable, so that might cause input mismatch exception to occur. So we will put the statements in which we are reading these values inside the try block. So we will give here age equals sc.nextInt. Similarly, we will read name sc dot next. Okay. Now here, if everything goes fine, we will display the age and name to the user. Fine. Now for try block, we need to give the catch block, and the exception that we are going to catch here is input mismatch exception. We will display the exception details and a message as well. Let's say age should be numeric. Okay. Now we will add the finally block after the catch block. Now here we will put the code which will be executed always whether the exception occurs or does not occurs in our program. Basically, finally block is used to perform cleanup tasks like closing the database connection or closing the file. In our case, we are going to close scanner over here. So we will give sc.close, and we can give a message also finally executed. Now we will call this method in the main method. So we need to create instance of our class first. And then we can call this method. We can give rest of the code as well. Now we will execute our program to check what is the flow of execution. Now if we enter age first and then name, then this code will be executed successfully. So we will get the age and name displayed. Catch block will not get executed in that case, but finally will be executed. So we will get this message finally executed and then rest of the code. Let's run our code and verify the output. Now we want to enter age first and then name. Let's say ABC. So it's displaying age and name, finally executed, and then rest of the code. Now what if we enter name first and then age? Then it should lead to the input mismatch exception. So here suppose if we enter ABC, we are getting java.util.input mismatch exception. This statement where we are reading age, we have next int method, so it cannot read string. So this statement is causing exception in our code. So the remaining statements of try block are not getting executed. That is, it is not reading name and it is not displaying age and name. From here, when the exception is thrown, control goes to the catch block. It tries to match the kind of exception. Yes, it is input mismatch exception. So catch block is getting executed, where we are getting this message java.util.input mismatch exception and age should be numeric. Thereafter, finally block is getting executed and then control goes back to the main method where we are getting rest of the code. So we have seen two cases: what if exception does not occurs and what happens when exception occurs. In both the cases we have seen finally is getting executed. Finally is also executed when exception occurs but it is not handled. Let's suppose if here rather than input mismatch exception, if we give arithmetic exception. Now here exception will occur but we are not handling that exception, but in that case also finally will be executed. Let's run the code. Suppose if we enter again string first, so it will cause input mismatch exception, but we are catching arithmetic exception. That is, we are not handling that particular exception. So here we are getting exception java.util.input mismatch exception. That is, our code is getting terminated abnormally. Therefore, we are not getting this rest of the code executed. But still in this case, finally is getting executed. Here, first this try block was executed. This statement caused exception. Control went to catch block to check whether we are handling it. No, we are not handling it. So finally got executed and we got the details of this input mismatch exception. So finally block is executed in all three cases. First case, exception occurs and we are handling it. Second, exception does not occur, and third, exception occurs and when we are not handling it. Finally, will not be executed if we explicitly give system.exit or some fatal error occurs in our code. In any other case, finally will be executed. Thank you for watching this tutorial.